Right, today we have Chance Mitchell on our episode 6 of the Athlete Things podcast. And world champion under 93 kilos. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I guess getting started, where do we want to start? I've followed your journey for a very long time. I've always been very impressed with what you're doing. And I've seen almost you come from the ground up. Like you've worked for fucking everything, man.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's been a while. I've been competing since 2014, early 2014.
Yeah. Just so you started as an 83 kilo?
Yeah. A rough 83 kilos.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
We've got your open powerlifting here with all your nationals, and like you started coming in 10th place as an 83, and now here you are, first time going to worlds, and you're a world champ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't look at some of those bench presses from 82 and a half, 83, or even up to like 90, I think. Yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
Nah. I guess is it kind of surreal? Like I know your first worlds, right? And you come out on top, you come out world champion. Like this is obviously something that you've been working towards the whole time. And to go your first time, like, is there anyone else that's really gone their first time and then come out world champion, right?
Kaiko did that.
Yeah.
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 For me, I never like my dream was never to win worlds. My dream was to go to worlds. Because like that's how competitive, like especially when I first got in to powerlifting, like, back in 2014, 2015, that was when, anybody that pulled like 315 or 320, like everybody on bodybuilding.com forums or anywhere is like, oh, this person's on gear, no question. Like drug tested, not drug free. It's stuff like that where like that mentality was around. And, you just have no idea where you can go with that extra amount of time. And eventually, it kind of happened. I've reflected on it even more afterwards, but I didn't really believe that I could win. It was just going was a huge W. And, maybe one day after that, when I establish myself, go to worlds multiple times, maybe I'll get second, maybe I'll get, third, and then win. It's one of those things where it's like the process is so fulfilling that once you actually do it, it's like, oh shit, like, what do I do? And not in the sense of like, you're not motivated to get better or really push, but it's just like, what's beyond that? Right now it's Sheffield. Like Sheffield is the huge thing.
Yeah.
But it is surreal. Like I didn't really process it at the time. And yeah, I'm blessed, obviously.
Yeah. Has your mentality shifted since you've, gone to the world stage? So you've been having a lot of matchups since 2015 all the way up till just last year, but it's all been in America. And then now that it's across other competitors on an international stage, have you kind of zoomed out and looked at athletes across the world rather than just within your own country?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys feel similarly, but for me, my perspective with the other USA lifters is that none of them care about anybody except USA.
Yeah.
And I would say so. So like everything is internal. The whole world is USA and that's it. We don't care about anybody else or anything else. Over the years, like my perspective on that has changed. Like I've seen like so many, crazy strong lifters. Enaharo is a good example of like, oh, most of USA didn't even know who he was. I knew who he was. I was friends with Will Valle for years. Flex, I know them. I've known of Enaharo for years. I've watched at the Sweden Worlds 2021. I've known of him for a while. But like most of the USA lifters had no idea that this 83 existed, at Worlds, watching him pull for the win against Delaney. I've known that. I've been following the outside scene way more than I think most USA lifters. And it's increased. I follow both of you guys. I have seen what you guys have done in Australia. I kind of watch specific scenes and kind of say, okay, this is what these people are doing. What is it that's going to work for them to get up to the next level? And then you try to like take pieces and kind of like put things together and form your own sort of culture around that, right? Like that's how I view things.
Yeah, of course. You can see that from like, I know just like small talks that we've had, just like your knowledge around powerlifting and like these individual lifters that people don't even fucking know about. Like you already know about them. You know just as much about them as their coach fucking does, right? Like you just know, like you just like studied the game kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it was really helpful for Worlds this year with like the 66 kilo battle. You know, I was already friends with Penna. I had him on a podcast. I already knew Ushi from Japan. I knew where he was at. I'd obviously seen Jonathan Garcia for years. You know, almost I know what these people are capable of. I can kind of piece what they're going to do together and kind of say, okay, hey, this is what we need to do. I've seen obviously Eddie for years, right? USA has no idea who some of these people are. Like they don't pay attention to anybody. So yeah, that's just like who I am as a person. I've gotten more into that, and I like studying the game in that aspect.
Do you have a formal process with that? So like, you know, you keep track of all these international lifters. Do you take time to kind of like just sit down and, you know, scout through previous performances, all those kind of things, or does it just kind of come out of interest and curiosity?
Yeah, I look at like that's a good example, like the 66s, right? I knew like Eddie Bergelin's, you know, best bench, you know, at 74, you know, and what his numbers were going into Worlds. And I told everybody, I was like, hey, you know, Eddie Bergelin's the one to beat. Penna's kind of hurt right now. And, you know, it's a lot of trying to get back. And, you know, if everything went really well, I think Penna would be really competitive at 66 in the Worlds, maybe second or third. But Eddie was the one to beat. I knew that. I told everybody. I told Two Eye Lights. I told everybody. No one listened to me. And I knew, like, on a good day, this is what he could be capable of. We're kind of playing around the top end, and then this is what we have to expect. I watch people's like habits in terms of attempt selection. You know, if they make their third deadlifts, that's a huge indicator of like, hey, someone you really have to watch out for. If someone, you know, goes 3 for 3 on squat all the time, or 6 for 6 going into the subtotal or going into the deadlift, those things are really important for head-to-head matchups. You've got to know that. You've got to know what these people's tendencies are. You've got to know if they're like an erratic lifter where their movement on the big three is just like unpredictable. Like those athletes, like, you know, how many times have you seen, you know, sumo deadlifter that's huge like capabilities? You know, they pull hook grip, you know, their initiation off the floor is kind of weird. It looks, again, a little erratic. Like you can't bank on this person making three deadlifts. Like something happens. Like either their grip issues happen, maybe they're just not capable of that right on the line of the third end or the top end of the third attempt. There's so many little things that kind of add into that. I like doing that. I'm a nerd in that way.
Yeah, it's good. I'll vouch for the fact that you said that Eddie was the one to look out for, because remember you voice messaged me the day before and said, look, everyone's talking about fucking Panna, and you said like Panna's not even, you know, he's not going to be in the discussion this year. Eddie is the one to beat. Like you literally said that to me the day before, and I was like, fuck, man, he knows Chance knows what's happening. He knows how this day is going to play out and how he can work this in his favor for Joe, or like you know exactly what you're going to do for Joe.
In the coaches aspect, you have to know those things, and then all you can do is kind of like.
I think he's cut out.
In the best. I think he cut off. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I was just saying that like you want to put the athlete in the best position to win by studying the field, and then knowing like, hey, you know, we just need to make lifts. Usually it comes down to that, right? Like typically make lifts and you win the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
When did you start thinking that way? Because I know you learned a lot of Matt Gary back in like 2016 when there was Colleen Worlds happening there.
Yeah. Matt Gary was a big influence on me in a lot of the more game day coaching stuff. I think it's funny. I've had so many disagreements with him on like programming and like the actual periodization of training and getting that optimized for whatever lifter. He still holds on to a lot of the old school type of traditions of, hey, we want to focus on recovery rather than being trained. And we really want to make sure they're well rested, that kind of stuff. And that's like, I mean, that's fine. But like his game day stuff, his approach for that is like very meticulous. It makes sense. Like he taught me a lot of like specific things of like, okay, you can't change your attempts this much times, or maybe you need to make sure that, okay, if you're going to put bluff, you need to put this number up, or hey, we need to have this as the planned third, and then maybe we can reduce this. Stuff like that is all really important. And I think a lot of people that don't have a lot of experience at the world level struggle with that. And it's really difficult because you just have to be in that situation to know that. Clean Worlds was a big deal. I got to shadow him for a lot of that week. I mean, that was back then when it was juniors, sub juniors, masters, everybody all at once. So I was there the whole week, just kind of just watching and like saying, oh, okay, this is how it's done. He's been huge on me. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm in
your general coaching, like you're self-coached now. I know you had Eric Baldhorn for like as a spinning board for a while. That used to sounding board. I mean, that used to bounce off. But how do you feel self-coaching? Like, how do you stay so objective in yourself?
I think that's like the hardest part, right? It is like anybody can learn how to periodize training and have things kind of adjusted, and you kind of learn as you go. The problem is being accountable with yourself and sticking to whatever plan you set out, right? Like there are times where, hey, I have a tendency to do this, and maybe I really just want to change this really quick. But hey, you stuck to this plan this long. Let's write it out. Let's see how it's going to go, and you commit to that. And regardless, like you have to trust yourself enough to know that hey, this is going to work out. There's a lot of people that can't do that, and I think a lot of people shouldn't be coaching themselves because of that. I think a lot of people that are very intelligent have a problem with that. They're very neurotic and struggle in that sense. They can't stick to whatever they say, and that I think it's normal. I think it's normal, and I think it's good to have a leader that you can kind of say, hey, I'm going to put this in your hands, and maybe I'll give you input, and then we'll kind of tweak things maybe together or however you want to do it. For me, I view myself in an outlier a little bit, as an outlier a little bit. And some of my recoverability, like intangibles is hard for a coach to account for. Like they would write out a training plan and it would be just like not enough work for me. And I would just eat through it. And it's hard to give them that feedback and be like, hey, why am I only doing 4 sets of 6 on squat? I could be doing like 3x8 with even more intensity. Things like that. It's like, it's hard to expect that from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting, man. Like I know I couldn't do it because I'd just be like, no, fuck that. I gotta change it. Or, I just wouldn't be able, I wouldn't have that accountability, right? I just wouldn't be able to do what you do in terms of like self-coaching. I could write it out, right? But following it is a whole nother fucking whole nother thing.
Yeah. Do you think as a third party perspective, if you were coaching someone else, there's a barrier there because you don't want the athlete to get hurt? Whereas with yourself, like you kind of know the way your body works, so you're much more aggressive with it.
Depends on the person. So I know some people they're just more injury prone. And so like I will naturally like be a little more conservative with them. Where some I know can handle a little bit more. And maybe I may be a little bit more aggressive, but it's not going to be anything to where I push myself, because I'm ultimately at the end of the day, like accountable for myself. Like if I get hurt, I get hurt and it's on my own. I don't blame anything on somebody else. If I win, I want it to be because I won, and not blaming or giving everything the credit there. So like even for my athletes, like anytime someone does really well, I don't want to be like, hey, I'm the reason why they did really well or anything like that. It's like, no, it's all on them. I guide them and I kind of show them the direction and give them a good path to follow and be there to support them. But I want them to win. Like people are winners or losers on their own. That's generally my perspective. Some people that are on that threshold or on the line that you can kind of push into being successful. But I think that's not usually the case, especially as we get to the higher levels. I don't even know where the question was that we originally started. I just kind of went off, but
that's fine. Yeah, go for it.
That's fine, man.
Go as hard as you want. Like I like just listening to you talk about the way that you think, super intellectual, and it's just like you have so many different thought processes, right? That like this is why I like was so interested in you for like a while, right? Because you used to put just like small snippets of like your story when they first came out on Instagram of just like what you were doing. I was like, this is so fucking like this is against the rules, right? Like these rules that we have,
Yeah.
and you were just like breaking them, but it was like it was working. And it'll just be like something small and be like, fuck man, like this guy doesn't care, but he understands what works and why it's working. It's like
Because I followed the rules. I followed the rules and they weren't fucking working for me. And so I was like, okay, I need to change something because it's like this is not going the way I wanted it to go. And then it's like, yeah, you tweak a little bit here and you change a little bit there, and then maybe that was too much. We'll pull back a little bit, and then we'll kind of work from there.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I guess like your resilience too, like you've been through some shit. Hey, like I remember when you fucked your foot up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I didn't know you knew that like that. I knew like probably you saw the face stuff and like me dropping bar on my face and shit like that.
Exploded toe.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Y'all remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and you still just like keep working. Like you're a dog, man. Like you just keep going. You can tell like, you know, like you can say like you always wanted to go to Worlds, but I think you're someone that was like, you were gonna win it eventually, like at any cost. Like if you've trained through like what you've trained through, what I've seen, like there's unless like there was someone that's truly unbeatable, like you were gonna work to get there no matter what. Like I've always seen that in you, just from like the small things, right? I can resonate with that. Like I broke my arm benching, and I was back in the gym 4 days later, like and I can understand. Like I'm gonna keep going as well. So like seeing someone like you is very inspiring. Like that kind of helped me get through some of those things and these like injuries, like obviously what I'm going through at the moment, like knowing that it's going to be fine, right? Because I've seen people like you just like push through it and be fine. Like you're world champ now. You just kept going, right? So that's very inspiring.
It's really nice to hear because it's, again, like for me, when I coach myself, I try to think of myself as like this other entity, and I'm not like in charge of that. Like I'm the coach, right? But like this athlete is just doing what he does. And like, I'm just writing out the plan. I'm following the plan. That's it. And like people ask, on game day, like, how are you going to do? Or like, what numbers are you going to do? I'm like, shit, I don't know. Like whatever he does, he's going to do. And that's it. Right. Like, that's how I think of it. And I never think about like, oh, I'm going to be world champ or I'm going to do this. So it's nice to hear that like you guys like believe in me more than I believe in myself. Cause I try to like ground and try to be like as realistic as possible. And, I think what happened with Worlds was like, just a lot of like good momentum. And I think that's like huge, right? Where it's like, yeah, people have injuries, people have things that happen, but like once you get back into that range and then you establish momentum again, it just goes. Yeah. And if you're able to add some of these details in, change some things, work on some things, you don't know where it could go. And so like, I'm super appreciative that people like see that in me when I don't see that in myself sometimes.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on as well. Like, just recently you really started popping off. Like from 2018 to 2021, you had like 45 kilos to your total. You ended up doing the exact same thing in the span of 8 months. So it kind of breaks the rules of this myth of like, once you get to advanced stage, like progress is going to start slowing down. And really, you've made it like, you've proven that wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think it's true that like for the most part, when you get to that higher level, it's very hard to get the extra boost onto your total. It's finding those little details, troubleshooting really well. And if you can't be objective with the details that need to be improved or fixed, it'll be very difficult for you to add that much. I think I got lucky in certain ways, and I found that momentum when it otherwise wouldn't have been there. But yeah, there's not too much I can say. Even from USAPL Nationals to Powerlifting American Nationals or Worlds, things just happened. And I'm somebody that's, when I'm in a good mood or when I'm positive, when things are going really well for me, things keep going really well. When things are bad, when things are not going well, it's very difficult for me to like fix that. And it's a lot of introspection into my own life, to how I feel about things, to change and redirect course. So that's like, especially now, like I've kind of come off a little bit of an injury. That's helped a lot, is finding the good stuff and building off of that and getting the momentum back.
How are you feeling now, actually? Because it was like a SI injury during your prep for Arnold's, wasn't it?
Yeah, so stupid. And that's like part of powerlifting is like some injuries happen and it's just like unavoidable and like it just freak shit that happens. That's just like part of the game. And I said this, I think, on the King of the List podcast. I'm so thankful that it was like after Worlds, right? Like something dumb happened, right? Like that's completely cool because then at that point I have X amount of months to re-get, shit back together and kind of build momentum again. But the baseline of where I was before at the same time, the previous year is much higher. Like I am much stronger than where I was at that time before. So I have a much better base to start. And then now it's like kind of when you decide that you don't want to do a meet after you get injured, you kind of have to like completely restart, refresh, and not try to force the issue. And then once you do that, then you can restart and get the momentum back. And that's what's been happening for me lately. Like things have been really good.
Yeah, it looks like things are starting to really kick off again. Right time too, right? How long have we got before Sheffield? March?
Yeah, March. Yeah.
Like
the end of March.
4 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Closing in.
Yeah.
Closing in. What is the deal with Sheffield? So we have just you, 93.
Me and Amar Kanane from Algeria.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that'll be good.
As of now.
As of now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they still haven't released the wildcards, have they?
Yeah, they have not.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then it'll be Worlds again. So also touching on that, so what's the deal with America, right? Well, like the PLA or PA, what they got to do? They have the totals.
Mm-hmm.
What is it again? That the name's for them.
It's Carpino. It's based off of the previous year's Worlds totals that won. Essentially, it just measures like what the placings would be if we were to go. That's essentially what it is. So it's just a good like guideline or benchmark.
So if you hit this total at Sheffield, you're automatically straight to Worlds. You don't have to do Nationals?
No.
Is that what happens?
So the winners from Nationals, as long as they hit those totals, those very, very high totals that they posted, will automatically get a spot. Problem is a lot of them are extremely high that most of the lifters that won Powerlifting American Nationals last year did not win or did not get. So like most of them would not be automatically invited. It would go to the second criteria, which is Sheffield totals. As long as we hit those numbers at Sheffield, which it's my own number, it's not going to be too difficult to hit that. I get that spot. So if, say, for example, one of the 59s or the 66s or 74s doesn't get that, it would go to an alternate spot. So where if, say, for example, Kaiko goes to Nationals, he gets the 93 national spot. I would automatically, as one of the only other Sheffield lifters, get that extra alternate spot and be one of the 93s.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Like if you had to do Nationals or not was kind of like where I was.
So I don't have to. I can, and that would just give me another option to win. And if I win, then I don't even have to worry about what I do at Sheffield. Yeah. But obviously Sheffield's a priority anyways. So
yeah. Another thing, like if we touch on like your mentality, right? Like the things there's so many small things that you do that like I'm not sure if a lot of people pay attention, but like I noticed like you shifted your whole schedule, your whole routine around Worlds, right? Yeah. Like that's not very many people think like that. Like you do these little minute things that's going to make a huge difference come meet day because just like how smart you are really like. Just thinking forward and knowing like what you got to do to be the best, right? I think like what time were you training? Something it was ridiculous.
It's like 2 to 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
Yeah, like people won't make these sacrifices right around like this in Australia, right? If we're talking about Australia, like we have a very select few. Like I'm ready to do it. Like I'm ready to get on whatever time schedule I got to get on for Malta. I don't care. Like I'm willing to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I know the difference that can make, but like a lot of people just don't think like that, or they're oh, this is not going to matter. Like you're the only person that I didn't see post how many hours they traveled, right? Like there were
Well,
so many injuries or
I was blessed in the opportunity to go to Dubai and literally train on a similar time schedule. Now you could also say that was like because I obviously
yeah.
made that as a priority
Well,
to do
were
that.
you smart? Like
Yeah.
Or
Like
you were
that was
intentional
really
about it.
smart. Yeah, and that I got on that time schedule and was in a really good environment to have training go really well and consistently be on point, and then fly only 6 hours to South Africa, and get there the same day, kind of have training feel great in the same aspect, where everybody else from America either maybe missed their flight, and then they had to like have it like rescheduled for the next day or something, and they missed a training day, or their training was screwed over because of direct 16, or maybe it was more than 16. It was like 20 something hours flight. And that's kind of, I was hoping you were going to bring this up, because I actually had a good conversation with Celine Crum about this yesterday, and about the work ethic thing, where it's like, you and I know you would do that. You're going to wake up at 2 a.m. to make sure training is great and perfected for Worlds. So that way everything is like accounted for. She made the point of like, hey, well, you're blessed in the fact that like you get to do this, and that's easy if like that's your whole life. Whereas like, say for example, someone like 30-year-old guy has a family, has whatever specific hard business that takes so much of his life up, and kids and all these other things. It's like they're working just as hard as you are, right? And in my head, I see the point and see the argument there, but I actually disagree, because like everybody has to give up certain things to get the goals that they want, or to accomplish certain things. And it's like, yeah, like that is one thing, but also at the same time, it's like my training, if it goes bad, I'm fucked. Like my whole life is based around my training. Whereas like if someone else has all these other things going on, it's not the end of the world if this person doesn't have the great training day, or if something else goes wrong and kind of takes their attention away from powerlifting, they're okay. Like they have so many other things in their life, whereas like I don't. Like I've put everything into this.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
For sure.
it's very very hard to wrap your mind around that unless you've seen that and you've been in that.
Was
Yeah,
that an intentional decision back in 2015 when you first started powerlifting? You're like, I'm going all in on this.
Yeah, so I actually I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I actually was enlisted in the Air Force before that, and I was like very set on the Air Force. I was enlisted for a year, and at the end of the year, like I was set to join, and they told me basically I was just too fat at the time. Meanwhile, like this was I was 180 something, 90 pounds, similar build ish, like leaner, obviously. Crushed all the physical standards and everything, but the US military standards are very strict and just like not body composition, hard, like actual numbers. Even if you're more muscular, doesn't really matter. You have to be like 160 something pounds at my height to be in the Air Force. And although the recruiter at the time said it was fine because I was doing everything, they ended up not letting me do it. And after that, I was like, I'm just really focused on this. Like, I just want to keep doing this. And at the time, I didn't know like what I could do with it. I just put everything into it, hoping that maybe it'll pay off or it's just helpful. And that's kind of one of those things too, is we're like, you're almost committing to be a loser that just focuses on lifting weights and that's it. When everybody else is doing these other things in their life and having, families and all this other stuff. And you take that hit. And for me, it was such a gamble, but it worked out really well. This whole conversation, I want to hear what you guys think about it too, because I think it's very short-sighted for people to see that, like, yeah, the guy that is 30 something that also does powerlifting, he obviously works hard because he has to do all these other things in his life, but it's not quite the same. Like, it's not the same as someone like me that gave their soul to this.
Yeah.
No,
we made that decision like years ago. Well, for myself, like, when I was in my teens and like, I had a rough post high school period and powerlifting was all I had. So I was like, okay, I'm going all in on this, and wherever it takes me, it takes me.
Yeah. And I think also, like, going back when people say like, someone's got this, they got that, that's going on in their life, it's that, but like, yeah, but we've made this our fucking priority. That is why you are at the level that you're at. I hopefully will get close to that level eventually. But I've sacrificed so fucking much, man. Like I benched until my arm broke, like I keep coming back from injuries. Like I was talking to someone the other day and like I got out of a 6-year relationship because I couldn't commit because I'm too invested in powerlifting, right? Like we were together for a long time. We had, house together, everything like that. And, it was the next step was the only way for us in a relationship, but I couldn't commit because I hadn't done what I feel like I've set out to do in powerlifting. Like it's literally just a fucking priority. Like it's my life. Like I just want it that fucking bad that I don't care what it's going to cost right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like, you can say blessed, but we just want it that bad. Right.
Yeah. And until you know that, it's hard to really understand that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And it's hard to explain that to someone because they're just like, it's like, it's just here. It's like, we just want it, man. Like, and you can't take it away from us. It's like, we're either born with it or you weren't.
I've had a lot of conversations with younger lifters at the gym. There's one that probably will listen to this that I talk to regularly. He's like 18 years old, strong kid, like 83 to 93-ish range. Squats like 270, benches 180, pulls like 270-ish as an 18-year-old, right? And he's like super, super, super invested, super strong. And he's kind of at that crossroads where he's like, I don't know what I should do. Should I like really push this and just give only to this and not focus as much on school and all these other things? And I'll tell him is like, hey, like this is such a gamble. Like if you have any doubts, like you should stick to the school, really focusing on your career and not giving everything to this. And if someone like that, if they're like, no, fuck you, Chance, I can do this, then good. Like that's on you because you're that committed, you understand it, you know what you're getting into, and cool. If not, like you need to really think about this because it's like such a commitment and you just started. Like at 18 years old, like you really don't peak until you're like early 30s in powerlifting or any sport. Like the early 30s is your peak and then you kind of fall off after that. So it's like you have so much time and there's going to be some shit that happens that derails things and you're just not injured yet, but you're going to have a catastrophic injury. You're going to have some of these things that happen. And then are you going to have the resolve to continue? You got to figure this out, man. Like, I don't want you to waste your time. I actively kind of discourage people from doing the route that I did because it's just, sometimes it's not worth it. It really isn't.
Yeah, exactly. It won't be for a lot of people. It definitely won't be, but like, still, like you could try and tell me that and I'd still tell you, I'd be like, no, get fucked, Chance. I'm doing this. Like,
yeah.
That's it. That's all I'm thinking about in my head. I think Danny's kind of the same. Obviously, fucking you coach Yuki now, so he's the same too. Like he's just like, I'm Yuki 66. Like he's that's him.
That's all we got. That's all we got.
Yeah. Oh, we fucking love it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think at a point it also comes to desperation as well. It's not just love, but it's like, if it's not this, then what else? Right? If we give up at this point, what was it all for? So we just got to keep going.
That has been a really big thing that carried me through the hard times is that like, hey, when you have to restart from nothing, essentially, you've already invested 8 years of your life into this, dude. What are you doing? Like, if you don't, you're a fucking loser. Like you were already a loser before this. And now you're even bigger of a loser if you fucking quit. That's been huge for me. Not quitting is like, it's everything. When things are tough, like you've got to be able to continue somehow. You got to find it. And usually it is that commitment that you set on this path and you gave up so much for this. If you don't stick to this, I don't know what to tell you. It's your loss.
Yeah, that's big too. I feel that too, that when we obviously, we have these lull periods where we're like, things aren't going well, things are going shit, and we get an inkling of doubt, and we're just like, if you stop, man, you're like, yeah, you're a fucking loser. Like, why would you stop now? You've invested all this time, all this money. It's your life. It's like, it's literally our jobs now, and you're just gonna fucking stop. Like,
yeah,
come on, man, get the fuck up and go train.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Like, where do we go from there? That we go heavy fast. You put 3 athletes in the same room that want to talk like that and think like that, then
yeah,
I guess shit. Like, what what led you to self-coaching in general? Because you worked with Eric, right? Were you
Uh-huh.
under Eric, like 100% fully invested under Eric?
Yeah. So I joined TSA in the end of 2015. And at the
Yep.
time I was group coached by Hanny, Bryce, and Eric all at the same time for like 2 months. And they quickly became just Eric. And I was like very happy with that. Like I really, he worked really well with me and my personality as well. And we understood certain things. He's very experimental in a lot of things. He wasn't somebody that was just like, oh, this is what the textbook says, so we're going to do this. It was like, no, if things are going well with this, we're going to keep doing this because it makes sense that it's working based off of all these other things that we know. And over time, I kind of learned those things about me, and then I was able to kind of forge my own path after that. So I love Eric. I know he has, like, if you guys know Elevate Barbell, this gym is like huge, doing really well in Colorado. So he's really focused on that. And that was like a big thing. It's just like, hey, like I'll be able to do this on my own. It's not an issue. And so, that was where it was.
Was it hard to start with, or did you just coast along straight away? It was.
No, it was pretty good. I'm again somebody that I feel very strongly to the fact of like, hey, if I want this and I'm going to do the work, I'm going to do all the things that are necessary. I will make the progress. I will get better. That I don't like. I think I could be coached by like three monkeys, writing on a RNG calculator, or whatever, and just putting in things, and I'm going to do it because I can do that in my head. Like I honestly believe this, and this is sucks to hear because if you're coaching people, you're like, wow, it's the coaching, it's the programming, this is all it is, like this is what matters. But it is like the hydration, it's the sleep, it's the nutrition, it's all these other things, doing the little details right. Like how many people do you see on Instagram that have like super stupid training and they somehow get stronger and like they somehow get better, where it doesn't make sense? I think those are the people that are working hard, right? Like even if they're doing it maybe the wrong way, they're putting in their effort the right way. And I think that's like 70 to 80% of the puzzle there.
Yeah, they're ticking the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ben Esco spoke on that on the King of List podcast the other day. You give two people the same program, there's always going to be one that's going to fucking progress faster and better.
Yeah.
And it comes down to that mindset and, ticking all those other little things outside of training, because there's so much outside of training, all those extra variables that are going to come into play in how you perform in the gym each day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you try to instill in your lifters as well? Like that resiliency and ability to, tick the boxes and stick with it?
So with the higher level lifters, I try to express that because I know that is like the majority of where it's going to come from. People that rely on the training and like the periodization to carry them, it doesn't work out well long term. Like they end up getting complacent, like with their own training. They get complacent on like execution. They get complacent on a lot of things. And ultimately, there's only so much you can make up from having like the godlike tier program. Like it kind of exists in a way. Like if you can figure out the exact thing, at one time that just builds momentum, it's very difficult for you to get that long term. So I try to establish that, especially with the higher level guys. The newer guys, I want them to have fun with training, and then I try to improve things as we go along, right? So like maybe an intermediate has only been squatting twice a week, very low volume. Okay, we can try adding in a third day with like a light single or something, and maybe like that is enough to get them to practice on their technique a little bit more. Maybe it's enough to just get the motor pattern a little bit better. Maybe that's just what they need at this point, and we can just add in little things to make progress. For the most part, I think it is the external factors, though.
Yeah, the external factors, and also like the person themselves and the way that how bad they want it, right?
Yeah.
If you want something that bad, then you're gonna. People will say there's outliers, but I think it's just like they just want it more than the other person, and you could see that for you going into Worlds, right? Like you wanted it, you were doing everything possible to win essentially.
Yeah, I really took it after Powerlifting American Nationals, because at Powerlifting American Nationals, I wasn't sure I would win. I didn't really think I was going to win. I was like, okay, I could really get this close. And then as long as I'm good enough based on, all the other people that I knew who were competing, I would probably get an alternate spot. And then it's like, okay, I am giving this. If I break, if I crash and burn, okay, well, at least I got to Worlds and, shit didn't happen. But I did everything right. I fucking woke up at, 10 p.m., went on walks to make sure I was, ready for the day, like the day, quote unquote, and then go train at 2 a.m. and do everything fucking right. And it worked out. And yeah, that was perfect. But again, it's kind of, that whole thing was like on me. Like I was in the right mindset. I was in the right, like every little thing was positive, and it built on that,
Yeah, you could see it. You could literally see it like from the outside. And it's like you were not gonna get off that platform and be like, I could have done this better. Like, because fuck that. If you have the opportunity and you can do it to do all these little things, then fucking do it. Don't walk off that platform and say, fuck, if only I did this, right?
Yeah. That one opportunity that I was desperate for 10 years that I never thought I would really get to, it finally showed up. And if I was the little pussy bitch to not actually do this every single thing correctly, then, who was I to say that I earned it, right? Like I needed that. For sure.
And you straight after nationals, you were training like that alternate spot was yours already. Like I remember that. I'm pretty sure anyway. You straight like this, and it was it was floating around social media that there could be an opportunity for you to go, and then it got announced, and it was like you could just see like you're already ready. You're already there, right? You already thought it was gonna happen, so you just, and then it was just bang, bang, bang. It just looked like session after session.
And that's what I've you and I have had this discussion too. It's like after your injury right now and kind of getting back to where you need to be, like all it takes is like your first, real world's prep with things going well, with momentum, and it just will continue. And you'll be in such a positive mindset and, space for success that it'll come. Like knowing you. Yeah.
That snowball effect just comes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you mentally approaching it the same way for Sheffield right now?
The approach after I won was like, I knew I wasn't enough ahead of everybody else, that I needed to get better. And I really, really pushed it. And then just one stupid like freak accident kind of derailed things. But now I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, I reestablished some of this volume. I reestablished a lot of good pacing to get to where I need to go to push. And that's like ultimately my goal, right? It's like getting to the point where I'm good, minimal pain, and have as much accrued muscle mass as I can, getting to push heavier weights without like really intensifying the mid-range volume. And then from there, it's like, okay, now I have the 3.5 months to really get into meet prep and push this. I know that it's in Instagram social media age that we're in now, it's very much of like, oh, this person's doing this and like they're fucking crushing it. And you want to be like that person, you want to beat them. So you need to be crushing it too at the same time. But that's not how it works. Like you can't be strong, like you're strongest, for a whole year, like nonstop. Like it doesn't work that way. Like there's going to be ups and downs, especially as you get to a higher level lifter. You're going to have to take that hit, and you got to know when that hit is kind of there and know how to get out of that and transition up.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I understand too. Like I've tried it before, tried to fucking push so hard all the time, and never fucking ends well. It never. It's always, and then it's like I've now realized, like, okay, man, you don't, like for myself, I don't have to be at the top here all the time. Can be down here, and it's going to lead to me going further. That's what I mean, would be so fucking hard for me to self-coach myself, like, like how you do it, because I just wouldn't be able to do that sometimes. Because I imagine Sean would be fucking banging his head against the wall with me sometimes.
It helps to have that pillar to say, hey, like, I don't, believe in myself right now, and like 100%, and this person has the plan, and I'm okay with that. And that helps relieve yourself a little bit. Again, it's very difficult when you're not doing it, when you don't have somebody else, as that pillar. You have to be that pillar for yourself. And then obviously the other athletes that you coach, it's very, very difficult. But I do see like the trends from other lifters, and I can kind of stay like realistic with myself, especially like for me. I knew 2021 nationals, I placed fourth. I think I placed fourth in the 93s.
And you'll be able to tell you.
Say that again.
Then you will be able to tell you.
Yeah, it was fourth. It was fourth. Can confirm.
It was fourth. Yeah, it was like Bob at fifth, me at fourth, Cameron Smith at third, and Gavin at second, and then Kaiko won, right? So I knew like I only did like 845. For me to get to like almost 880 within that year or less than a year and make that much progress, it was a lot. I pushed my body very hard. So it's natural to expect you to have some sort of injuries or kind of things come up. And again, thankful that it was after and not during.
You think if that had happened to you now before UK prep, and that was in Worlds, you still would have just kept fucking going?
I would have pulled back a little bit after Arnold, knowing that I was about to start meet prep again. But I try not to think about the what ifs as much. Like it's very, very difficult to like try to be conscious of that, like while things are going really good, and pull yourself back, especially for me, because I'm somebody that really needs to practice my technique for deadlift. If I miss a training day on deadlift, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? That kind of stuff drives me crazy. Like I would rather just continue to train, even if it's lesser intensity or a little bit less volume, and just focus on the practicing of the technique is huge. I probably would have pulled back though.
How do you find it as well when you have so much momentum, right? And you're just every single training session is just like you're just like firing it all the time. To be able to know when to just take, we've got to take that little step back to keep going, keep holding on to that momentum. How do you do that being self-coached as well? Because I know with myself, if that were to happen, like I'll just be like, let's just fucking just giddy up, let's go.
Yeah. Well, the timeline of like events is a big deal. Like, so just factoring that in. And that's why I was like, I wanted to push for the Arnold because it was a new meet. Like I've never done other international meet outside of Worlds. And to get that experience, it was going to be good. I really wanted to push for that, but I was like, no, the timeline of events really doesn't matter too much. You can pull back and not do this one and really focus for Sheffield. I've seen the trends. Like for me, I know what tends to happen when I get to specific ranges. So like at the Worlds prep, I was doing like 4 sets of 4, 5 sets of 4 with like 260, 265 on squat those last couple of weeks. That range, that like rep range and intensity range for me is where I get hurt. So I try not to stay in that for more than a couple weeks, few weeks. And then I kind of phase out of that and go back to what I know I'm healthy and okay with. That's the biggest thing. So like I do great with like higher rep volume, even into higher intensities. And as long as I stay in that, I'm usually pretty good. Like no matter what I do, I'm pretty good. When I get to the other stuff is when it gets risky.
You're very logical in your approach, right?
How about prior to that happening, or prior to you figuring that out? Were you kind of just running off willpower and just pushing through pain?
That is, we could talk about this too, is the pain tolerance thing for me. I have a very, 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 very high pain tolerance to where like most like knee tendonitis type stuff, like that's normal. It's not a big deal. Anything like that is any sort of tendon type pain, I'm good with. I'm more worried about like, hey, if you have so bad tendonitis that you're squatting with it, like could your knee snap or something? Like that's what I'm thinking. It's not necessarily like the pain level doesn't matter. Like that I think is a huge deal for people to be successful after getting injured or coming off injury, is reestablishing that and knowing that some pain is okay. And like, you've got to be fine with that and accept it for it to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same in terms of like my pain threshold. Like I don't even know fucking what a pain threshold is. I literally have like, can I train or can I not train? Mm-hmm. That's how it feels for me. And then like leading into Nat's just gone, like it got to a point where I was in that much pain that I was like, I could do one squat and then I couldn't do fucking anything else. And then I performed terribly because of that. But there was there was no way I was not going to show up on that platform. Like I've wanted to go to Worlds since I started, and I've had it taken off me like 4 times now. That I was like, I don't give a fuck if my leg breaks, I don't care. I'm fucking doing this, and I'm going to Malta. Like,
Yeah, that mentality that you have, a lot of people don't like to hear that because it's like it says something for them and how they view things. And it's like, I know that feeling very well. Like when it happens, when you go and you show up on meet day and you just do it no matter what, like that's your mission, that's your life's purpose up until this point. It's very difficult for people to understand that.
yeah, I know. A lot of people don't understand it. That's okay, man. Like obviously, but like they got to be okay with like myself being like this as well. I think.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people aren't. They'll just be like, you shouldn't be doing that. Like what? Like this is costing you so much, or you've got a break or something. But like, I'm at a point where I don't care. Like I need to get healthy now, obviously, and we went through this phase after an injury, but I didn't care getting there. I was like, I need to do this. I need to win, and then I'll worry about what's going on. And that's just, I think that's just how I am mentally. Like I'll just do it. We got to push through it, and I'm okay with pushing through it. As a coach, we obviously we're different with our athletes. We'll be like, hey, we need to actually acknowledge how serious this is, and if we probably got to take a step back. But as an athlete, no, it's completely different there. I'm pushing through it.
Yeah.
Are you similar to that, or
in terms of the coaching aspect, where like we approach it completely differently? Yeah, like that is for sure different. I know some athletes that have that mentality similar to me, but I will always like let them be the one to say like, no chance. I need to be able to push through this before I let them do that. Or if they can prove it to me some way, right? Like I always have athletes that think they know, like, oh no, I know that I could do this attempt or something. And I'm like, no, like I know you can't. And then I'm like, you need to prove me wrong before I can trust you in that way, right? So even with injury stuff or like pain tolerance stuff, if you're complaining about something to me, like I need to take that seriously until you prove to me that it's like, no, like I'm complaining, but this is fine. Like I'll be able to do this, understandable. And then they'll tell me, hey, I had a PR or something, right?
Yeah. Interesting. It's like, yeah, I remember having a conversation with Sean before another meet, and he was like, no, we need to acknowledge how sore, like, because my leg, it's been bad for a bit, and he's like, we need to acknowledge how bad this is. Like, this isn't a high stakes meet. It wasn't nationals, it was a different one. And me being me, I just replied to him. I was like, I'm just going to stop talking about it, and let me go out, and I'm just going to prove you wrong that I am okay, and then I'll do it. And I did. I went 9 from 9 that meet. That was a good day. So it was like I had this in me now that like I got to go and prove him wrong. So he wants me to not do it, but I won't do it that much that I'll prove him wrong.
Over the years, I think most athletes learn that, especially the successful ones. They'll learn that and kind of figure out, okay, do I need to take this as seriously? And you get better at identifying it.
Yeah, it's taken me a while, to be honest.
You've instilled that in me as well. So like now we know when to push and pull back.
We know when to go and when not to go, and when something is a bit more serious.
Yeah.
But do we want to jump on the hot takes, Danny, that you had?
Yeah, let's do it. We can talk about whatever.
All right. We'll start off with, so now that the USAPL is kind of split off from the prestigious IPF and officiating in that manner.
Yeah.
What's your take on the standards now that USAPL is kind of running its own thing?
I've made jokes, and I've joked with other lifters where it's like they squat, big PR or whatever, and then you're like, oh, USAPL, 3 whites, when it was like clearly high. I think it's very noticeable for people on the outside. They see that And I think even at Worlds this last year, I had multiple people come up and tell me like, "Oh yeah, you Americans always squatting high," and I just like didn't think of like that as the real like a real thing that was just said all the time. And then like they started saying it more and more, and then I had like had so many like junior lifters that I've talked to like about work like at Worlds or they're going to compete at Worlds, and they fucking I was like, bro, like you got to squat deeper. You've got to squat deeper. You've got to squat deeper. All right. Yeah, Chance. I know that you know what you're saying. I got it. I got it. I'll do it. And then they almost fucking bomb on depth. There's so many USAPL lifters where it's almost like, I don't know this is true, but with USAPL, they're really pushing the fact that like we have the world's strongest lifters, that they're like almost lightening some of the, you know, the rules or rather guidelines on depth. To make sure that they do have the strongest lifters. And I think it's been really clear here recently. Some of the standards on any of the lifts has been a little rough. I think a lot of people within US don't want to acknowledge that. But yeah, that's what I've seen.
I think social media makes it hard too because there is so many American lifters, and if they're all squatting to the same standard, us like in Australia or whatever, we see that as the standard. So it's like, okay, like, no, my squat's fucking fine. My squat's fine. Whereas like, it's not. It's
like getting cognitive dissonance
of fucking social media because there's so many Americans that we see that are like, you know, that have such a high following.
I think one thing too is like in America, we look for like the little dip into the hole, whereas like in IPF, you are looking for the hip crease has to be below the knee. It doesn't matter if you like dip all the way down or anything, or if your calves are touching, you know, your hamstrings, right? Or your hamstrings are touching your feet, or almost in my case, like from the side, it still looked like my hip crease was like right there. And so like for me, I was like, even in training afterwards, I was like, okay, I need to take this seriously because even though it feels like I'm going down as deep as I can from the sides, it doesn't look there. Whereas like I know with USAPL, they don't give a shit. No one's thinking about that. Like it looks good enough. All right, that counts. Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing your photo of your squat from the side on your story. And this is high, and I was like, what the fuck? Like you literally your ass was on the floor.
Yeah. And I trying to be as realistic with myself because it's like, okay, I can see that and it looks like that dip is there. But even on my opener at Worlds, I knew I cut it a little high because I was dealing with whatever shit that the judge was telling me about my hands and stuff like that. And I was like, all right, let's just go. And I knew I cut it high. I was like, okay, that's fine. That's on me. That was on me. Second attempt, it was to me, it felt like it was good, but even from the sides, you can see that like hip crease is like right there. I think the USA standards, man, it's again goes back to what we said, where a lot of USA like really is only focused on what we're doing here, and that's it. Like they're not worried about like what other IPF countries are. And that was one thing that I was really big on with IPF is like, it doesn't matter. Well, I'll say before USAPL, Korea, Australia, and all this other stuff, there was no other option for these other countries to have their, you know, entry point into USAPL. Like it's a separate thing. All the other countries are in the IPF. Like no matter what, they are IPF affiliates. It doesn't matter what USA does or is banned or isn't banned. The rest of the world is in the IPF. Like I think it would be silly to like just ignore that. And that's why I was like, no matter what, like I'm sticking to IPF. Like it doesn't matter to me. We're not a whole world if we can't do that, right? We're just this one country that thinks everybody is here, and because we're very strong, that's all we really cared about at the time. But I think more people are starting to recognize that, like, yeah, the rest of the world can keep up, right? If we had like a powerlifting meet where it was like USA versus the world, I think at this point now the world would absolutely win. And where USA doesn't believe that, like USA thinks like, no, like we are still the strongest by far. It doesn't matter.
How's it feel over there actually since the split of USAPL from the IPF?
There's a divide.
Yeah.
There's definitely a divide. Yeah. One of the things, like for me, and I talked to Sean because as at this time of the podcast, I left Team Nori, And one of the problems is, two of our coaches, me and one other coach, can't be involved with USA powerlifting at all.
That's with Eric.
Say that again.
With Eric Larson.
Well, three. Eric Larson, because he's in Sweden. Michael Jin, because he received a suspension with the USAPL for failing a drug test years ago and was like indefinitely suspended. And then I, being IPF world champion, involved with IPF, like I can't even show up to local meets to coach, let alone nationals, let alone other big meets. So it's like, okay, well, like I am forced to be disconnected from USAPL. And it's the same way. There's a lot of the other USAPL lifters that don't care what Powerlifting America is doing or anything like that. So it's just unfortunate that it had to be like that. But yeah, it is a real thing. I can't coach many USAPL lifters in person. So at this point now, it's like, why do I want to take on more USAPL lifters? I shouldn't. I don't. I want to work with international people.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's a good pivot as well, because now standards are also changing with bench press as well.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we also have to account for.
Yeah, that's been huge. So I coach a few Japanese lifters that are like heavy bench technicians, and like it's been rough. I'm not gonna lie. Like one that I coached, this 59, just broke his national record in Japan with like a 170.5 bench. And everybody at that Japanese meet, is like a national meet, was like obviously there to break the bench records before they changed. And so like now him with like tiny short arms with no range of motion, trying to recalibrate and learn how to bench with this whole different style is definitely a challenge in terms of coaching and trying to get that, especially across a language barrier too.
Yeah, man.
Is there anything
Say that again?
Is there anything in particular that you're doing with those lifters around that?
Yeah, so I'm sure like a lot of the Japanese love to bench like 6-7 days a week with a shit ton of volume and whatever, like crazy stuff, like really focus on bench. Each block that I've worked with him, we've reduced the frequency on like what I call like old technique bench and like a new technique bench. It's like, we're transitioning like one block 6 days a week, and now it's like 5 days a week. We're still keeping the same frequency, but it's like, okay, now new style. Okay, now another new style day, and now another new style day. Trying to phase out of that. It's still difficult because it changes. Like obviously when you're doing way more range of motion, the stimulus is higher, and you have to recover a little bit more, and there's all these other factors at play here. So it's difficult, and especially when you don't know like if this is purely the technique that's like changing how much strength they have on this movement, or if it's other variables or whatever it is. It's definitely been difficult. But as we see, like even then, like his strength like was still really high for him to just show up and do essentially a bench only and bench 170.5 with old style technique.
At 59 kilos.
Yeah, 59. That's insane.
Wild.
What else did you have, Denny?
Next one I had, certain nations will not reach world standards due to the surrounding values of that society.
Do you feel like America is different as well, Chance? So do you feel like the society itself and the way that you are brought up is different, which leads to like this higher level maybe?
It's going to be weird because it all depends on what the USAPL wants to do. Because like if they're not going to change the standards, a lot of standards aren't going to change for everybody else. Even like people that are in Powerlifting America, they don't see it. I'm trying to like help people out and like, hey, dude, this isn't enough. I know you're seeing like these other USA lifters hitting this depth. We're not there. We got to go deeper. I don't know if it'll change. I really don't know. I don't know how long it's going to be before we step it up.
I think I also want to apply it in terms of like, just performance wise as well. So, some countries might not be perceived as strong. Say, for example, Australia. Our standards are quite low in comparison to, what America holds to be top standard. And
gotcha.
as you know, America's like very sport oriented, and they value that, whereas we don't. So, what's your take on that?
So I actually had this conversation with Kyoto Ushiyama from Japan. Actually did a podcast with him that I'm about to post here soon. and we talked about that. Because I explained like, you know, the culture in like Texas versus the culture in Japan for lifting weights is like a whole different thing. Like we grow up in like junior high school, like grinding in the weight room to, you know, be, you know, the starting running back or the starting wide receiver. And like if you kind of get hurt or something happens, like, oh, next man up. Like, and everybody's like that in like 12, 13 years old because high school football's so big in Texas, like American football, that you're competing so early on, and we have such a bigger pool of diverse athletes and like from all different cultures or whatever, that it breeds that success. Where in like Japan, like even the culture for like deadlifting, like you're not supposed to deadlift in certain places because it's loud and it'll disrupt, you know, the neighbors essentially. Like, and that's like very, very frowned upon in their culture, right? So even something like that, like shapes the way like their lifting is, right? So like in Japan, they had like 1,100 lifters at their like raw nationals for bench, like bench only. But their actual like, you know, raw nationals full power meet was like 200, 300 people, right? And it wasn't even like live streamed, whereas like their bench was. Like things like that. It's like, okay, well, how do you expect to catch up, you know? Like you're not prioritizing that. Or for example, I've talked to multiple of the Japanese lifters that I coach, and I'm like, what's the deal? Like, why are you guys like benching 6 days a week, 7 days a week with all this volume and frequency? And then you're squatting twice a week and you're doing like a 3x4 at 68%, 70%. It's like, are you surprised that like you're not getting that much better on like squat and deadlift? Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we've got to change this focus. And, you know, now like the lifters that I'm working with are doing really well. Like bench is kind of staying around where it is, but like squat and deadlift are like just taking off. And Kyota from Japan, the 66, he was telling me like, yeah, like we're trying to adopt a lot of the USA like coaching and like periodization models and stuff like that, and trying to learn and like take some of your advice because it's worked. Like they're getting better, but they're so far behind. Where maybe in like Australia, I think, especially because, you know, English speaking countries, you guys like everybody kind of shares the information, and we kind of like implement it a little bit. Different coaching teams, for example, you kind of like see this is working for these people. Okay, we're going to try this out. The UK has been really good. Like they've come up really, you know, far in the last like 2 years, I would say. And I think they've adopted a lot of the coaching philosophy that we use. I coach Owen Leggett, right? He's taking a break right now, but like he's one of the big coaches for the UK that's working with all the top level lifters. And I see them on Instagram doing like ascending volume sets on deadlift and doing like some of the things that I would do just because, you know, he had that influence for me, and they're doing really well. So it's like, okay, just stuff like that. It's like, it's people see it. People are trying things out and they're, you know, getting a little bit more creative. With some of the countries that don't speak English, I think that's the problem.
Yeah, 100%. I think in Australia, like it's like we have this is the social norm is like for us, it's like work Monday to Friday and then drink all week and have barbecue with the family. Like it's that's why I think we're behind in that aspect. We have like people aren't like switched on like that. Like you know, just in terms of like that athletic mindset or that athlete mindset, we just don't have that. We're not brought up with that from a young age.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's starting to happen now, but it's weird. That's why we're so far behind. And touching back on ascending stuff, I feel like you're one of the pioneers for that.
Thank you. I tell people that, and people are like, no, like, oh, we were doing it. I was like, no, I was pushing it, bro. I was pushing those.
I told you, man, I've been following you along for a while. I don't remember anyone else really doing it before you were.
They work. They're so good for like reestablishing like confidence and getting like good momentum back. Like especially off injury, it's like good auto regulation work. You can write out a couple like lighter sets and then start writing like RP6 or maybe an RP7 or 8. Yeah, it's good healthy production.
Yeah, no, it is. What was ours, Danny?
Powerlifting needs more controversy to become more popular.
So as I've gotten older, I've found myself less interested in some of that. Whereas earlier on, I think like, oh, like you want to know who's beefing and you know who like hates this person and all this kind of shit. And now I just don't like care too much. Like I don't even get involved with a lot of that stuff anymore because it's just like I don't really care. But I do agree that like it's interesting and people like that and that gets them involved. I think I don't know if you guys know like Richard Cho, like Pug the Goat on Instagram.
Yeah.
He like a lot of people, you know, whatever your take is on him, like a lot of people started powerlifting or focused on powerlifting. A lot of Asian community like followed him and like that helped a lot. And you know, he was like his whole thing was like I'm the villain or whatever, and being controversial in that aspect, you know, as cringe as it is, I think it did, you know, some good for powerlifting in that sense, right?
Yeah, it definitely helps. It definitely is cringy, but it definitely like
Yep.
leading up to our nuts here, someone's trying to start like beef with me, and I was like, what the fuck did this come from? And then I like bought into it, and then after I was just like, I was so exhausted, man. I was like, I don't ever want to fucking deal with this again. Like,
Yeah.
why did you even do that? I messaged you. I was like, why, man? And he's like,
Yeah.
publicity. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why did I buy into this? I'm so fucking.
What I've heard with him, because I actually have talked to him in person a few times, and like I've seen like he literally tries to just be like a different person online, just like for attention and like everything else. But he's really trying that up. And maybe he's different now, but like yeah, I just don't have time for that, man. Like I have so many people that I get back to every day that I have to like keep up with. I have stuff like in my personal life that I want to do. Like I also still like obviously training is a huge deal. When I train, like I'm not someone that's like, oh, I'll send a million voice messages between my squat or bench or whatever. Like when I'm training, I'm focused on training. Then we'll deal with the real world after that. And then that's how I do it. So little stuff like that, no shit, no shot am I wasting my time and effort on that or emotional like energy. No.
Yeah. I think we're at a crossroads in Australia where it's like, oh, we want it to be more entertaining. So how can we get it like that? And I think that's the general strategy where it's gone. It's like, all right, let's create fake beef and it'll make these it'll make these matchups more interesting.
It just made me fucking tired.
Yeah, it just makes you tired. It makes you not have fun doing the other things that you're supposed to have fun with, and just more stress. That with that podcast that I recorded with Ishiyama, he was saying that like in Japan like it's very respectful. Everything is like very chill and not a lot of beef, but like behind the scenes, like everybody's fiending for that, right? Like essentially, you know what I mean? Like they're like they try to work into the drama. They try to see like, oh, who's beefing with this or what's going on here? Or can I like report somebody for doing this? And just weird shit. And like, that's what happens when you have too much extra time on your hands.
Yeah. I guess like if you look at rivalries, right? Like 83s was always really watched because of Sean Dress Rust, right? In the USA, just because of that. Everyone wanted to see who was going to win.
The storylines are big. I just think it can be about that and not necessarily about like what the dude said about your girlfriend or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Just on powerlifting.
Do the talking, right?
Right. And even for me too, it's like people like in the highlights for Worlds or like leading up to Worlds, like, oh, Chance is gonna do this, or like Chance has this free, or like, oh no, Kaiko's gonna win, whatever. I hate even saying like, oh, I'm definitely gonna beat this person. It's like I don't know. Like I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna show up, and I'm gonna like hype myself up, but I'm not gonna like claim that I'm gonna do X or I'm gonna do this. I'll kind of show up and let the lifting do the talking, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And you obviously knew you were coming up against a phenomenal lifter as well, or phenomenal weight class, right? Like the 93s is fucking stacked.
Yeah, there was like 5 people that could have won.
Yeah, fucking oath. It's going to be the same again, or you might be too far ahead.
We'll see. Yeah, I think Emil is the one that is. I think he's injured right now, but like he has a lot of potential for progress. Kaiko and myself, Gustav. I don't know if you guys know. Gustav is like 6'1" at 93, and he's like always cuts a lot of weight. So I think he's gonna want to move up soon. We'll see. But like a lot of us are short. A lot of us like have room to add more muscle. This weight class is conducive for making long-term progress, I'd say. Because deadlift, you don't have to actually add that much more muscle. Like you can get better at the neurological pattern of deadlifting and getting better at that. Or squatting, I think for me, working with a little bit higher intensities for a longer period of time works out really well. But I see a lot of the 93s and I'm like, I feel like y'all's muscle mass on your quads are not enough to be trying to squat like 330, 335 or something. Like once you get that up, like shit. I don't know. Like I have to work really hard to keep up. I know that.
Just quickly, do you want to touch on like the intensity that you work at? Because I know you have a very, very high kind of threshold that you can work towards in terms of volume and intensity.
Yeah, I think it depends on the exercise. So like for me with deadlift, although I like working with really high intensities, the range of motion and like the actual cost of what I'm doing is not very high. So where it's like, holy shit, you're doing, 330 for a set of 4 or 5 or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, my 330 for 4 or 5 is not the same cost as it is for you to do, even 290 for a set of 4 or 5. For you to do that, like your back's like shot, your everything is like taking a big hit in terms of recovery. Where for me, like, it's all quads and I just finish with my glutes and hamstrings and that's it. I don't have to worry about like my erectors like really getting drained. With squat, I do really well with like higher reps. So when I do higher reps, I've been pretty adapted to it. It doesn't drain me that much, but the higher volume with a little bit higher intensities, that is probably the most demanding. And then bench is bench. So yeah.
Bench is bench.
Bench is bench.
Yeah. That was all, Danny, or
Last, I've got one more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being transparent on social media with your training is a weakness.
Is this your view personally, or is this Steve's view? Whose view is this?
This one for me, I got off Taylor Atwood. So his take on it is like, if you can manage to hide your personal life and the way things are going in your training, you can be perceived as more competitive, or you have this aura around you, right? So there's people that kind of post their training when things aren't going well, just for the sake of being transparent. Because on social media, there's we all know it's a highlight reel, right? So if you go the opposite direction, you be transparent, you kind of virtue signaling,
yeah,
right? But there is an advantage to keeping Instagram or whatever as a highlight reel.
I think the culture of just where we're at now in 2022, it's very much that virtue signaling and kind of showing like, hey, I'm vulnerable, or hey, I'm a lot of these things. To me, that's how I see it. And I don't think it just, people feel sorry for you, but it doesn't, I don't think it paints too much positive. I think there's a level to it where it's okay. And then beyond that, it just looks weird and it looks like kind of sad. If we're talking about like personal life, I don't know with Taylor's situation. I know like he has a kid. I know he's like has a lot of stuff going on in his life. I'm surprised that's his thing, because like especially recently, like he's been posting like a lot of like lighter training stuff, like rehab stuff. So I don't, is that what he means? Because like he's being very transparent by showing his like super light like rehab stuff, right?
Yeah, that's true. I guess he's changed his mind, because recently he kind of wants to share a bit more of himself. But previously he used to be that way. It's like, okay, if I don't show that kind of side of myself, people will assume that like I'm coming in strong and ready.
Yeah. Well, I stopped caring as much about that, honestly. Like I think, especially for Taylor, right? Like Taylor's number one, like by points, at least with the IPF current scores and stuff like that. So in the IPF number one, he wants to show that he's number one and no one can fucking touch me. And I'm by far the best. And I've seen like his like King of the Lift stuff where he's like, no, like let X person come, like I'll fucking beat them at Sheffield or whatever. And a lot of times I think that's like projection to help yourself. A lot of people need that to feel like positive about training, for them to be in a good mindset and be successful. Where I think a lot of people have their doubts about themselves or about their training. And you want to like kind of show like, okay, no, like I can do this, or like, no, like you can't touch me no matter what. And it is projection ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah. The transparency thing is weird. I've stopped being as transparent with stuff because I don't think it's necessary. Like I don't show a lot of my life outside of powerlifting because it's like my Instagram is like a powerlifting Instagram.
It is.
Yeah, like the people.
Chris Chance do.
Yeah. Like I'm studying another language right now. Like I'm really focused on that. Like there's other things that I enjoy in life, but like obviously my main focus in my life is powerlifting. So that's what I'm going to post, and I'm going to keep it to that. But yeah, I think there's a level where it's like some random people don't need to know like my personal life about whatever, you know?
I'm like that as well. It's like my Instagram looks like powerlifting, and that's it.
Yeah.
No one actually knows what I get up to or what I'm doing most of the time.
It's weird having thousands and thousands of people like see what you're doing every day and like watching that stuff. And some people are like way too, in that aspect, like way too transparent to like show like their house and like where they live and like weird shit to me. I don't know.
I get what you're saying. One other quick thing, I guess,
Yeah.
it was your first worlds. Also, you won, you world champion, but you were also second overall, right? Like, did that mean anything to you as well? Did you
It was
even
pretty. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, the second overall didn't get me anything extra, but it was like holy shit! Like it's not just you won the class; it's like you are the top of the top, in that aspect across everything. Um, I know the dots change, like the IPF from Wilks to points and all that kind of stuff, kind of helps the 93s. But I do think it's like valid, right? Like the 93s were the most competitive class, so it's like not surprising that they have the highest relative points. Um, it felt good, man. What else can I say?
Cool. I just wanted, we didn't touch on it, but I obviously knew it anyway.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
would be a good feeling, I can imagine.
Yeah, I believe that wraps up our podcast for today.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else to say, Steve?
No, that's all. Thanks for coming on, Chance. Great
Yeah,
to
it's
talk
fun.
to.
Yeah, I enjoy doing these podcasts. I like talking about whatever. Some people really get a lot out of like hearing me or all of us speak about things that like, obviously see posted on Instagram, like on social media. So I think it can help a lot of people. So like anytime I can do these, it's great.
I think that's what we're trying to do in Australia right now, man, is like just trying to promote the fact that you're allowed to be an athlete. You're allowed to take it serious.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the reasons why, like the population of powerlifting is quite large, but we haven't really got anyone. And I think it's because we haven't promoted or no one takes it serious. Like I said earlier, like a stigma about like life is to, work Monday to Friday and then party all weekend, basically. No one's really like dived in and accepted like, okay, like we can fucking do this. We can put our mind to it. And, if we go at it, we can be a powerhouse nation, I believe.
The culture is changing, I think, for most countries. It's just, I don't know if it's fast enough for most countries to keep up with specific other countries. Like France has like leveled up really fast in the last like couple of years. USA has always been kind of pushed in that direction. I think it'll continue to be pushed. It's all culture. Like if you think that the culture is shifting for Australia, then that's going to be huge. Within the next couple of years, you guys will make big progress. The big part of like the Asian cultures, they're fucked. Just to be straight up, like they don't value a lot of the same things, which is fine. Like different countries have their own culture, and that's like part of it. But like when I talked to Ishiyama about like getting more people involved and kind of highlighting some of this, some of these countries don't have like good live streams set up for their nationals for these big meets. They don't know what's going on. They don't know the top level lifters. Ishiyama qualified for Sheffield, but no one in Japan knows that Sheffield's a thing. Like they don't know like Sheffield is like this huge meet where they could win money. Even for Japan, like by law, they can't win money through sports and by gambling and certain other things. There's restrictions on that with the government. There's a lot of weird things that, like, if you know this, like, why would you get involved in something that, like, trying to be the best at this, that you know you can never win and give your life to this? There's so many weird things with certain countries that, like, you just can't afford to make it with powerlifting, right? Like in America, a lot of the top level lifters either coach somebody, or they coach athletes, or they've dedicated their life to this in some way. They can make it work and monetize it somehow, either with like YouTube, with like Russell, or making a gym and doing all these other things. And then they can focus on just powerlifting. A lot of countries can't, like, they just can't do it. So how do they put more effort and time and commitment and all these other things other than other countries? They just don't. Like, that's just how it's going to be. There's some outliers, obviously, but those outliers are very few and far between, and very, very rarely are those outliers enough to beat a bigger pool of outliers, right, in these other countries.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, good chat.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chance.